Hey everyone, good morning. It's Rob Foglia and Jessica Klein coming to you from Keller Williams here in Nashville for Foglia Properties, and wanted to go through and just basically give y'all our Friday market update on Facebook Live here. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the market stats because some of the main numbers have come out here, and so we're going to touch on some of that as well as what this means. Because you'll see the title of the video here being about why is it a good time to sell your house. And because I think a lot of times we'll hear that narrative and that it's a great time to sell, and we don't quite get told why. It's just, hey, great time to sell. Why don't you list your house? And that's not necessarily what we're saying. We want to just help educate you and make sure you understand why it may make sense to do it now, and just why the market conditions make sense for it to do it now. Anything you want to add before we get started, Jessica?
No, I think that sounds great. I'm all about the statistics, so I'm ready to dive in.
All right, cool. Well, let's do it. Well, as y'all can see here on the screen, basically what we've got pulled up, we've got stats straight from RealTrax, the system that our MLS here system that we use to list properties, and we've got our new May statistics that have shown up here, and so we want to go through these with you. And this first thing we're looking at is actually new listings, and as you can see, here on the screen, we've hit a 3-year low in terms of new listings that have hit the market, which is insane to me. I mean, I'm surprised to see that, only because this time of year is normally when they start to tick up a little bit. Like, even if you go back to 2017, when they were previously close to right now, you can see a big jump here between April and May, and it continued to rise there toward the end of the year. And I'm guessing that's going to be around the same here, where April, May, and then it starts to rise in June in 2018. So typically we see it rise, not fall. What do you think about this, Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is really just, just me thinking through what we're seeing here. I think that current events have had a big impact on that. I mean, we've mentioned before, April was a little bit of, we joke and say it was like a black hole in real estate a little bit. Everything just kind of paused. And like you said, that's normally, spring going into summer, that's when people really get excited and they spring clean and they put their house on the market. And we didn't really have a chance to do that. And everybody kind of put their life on hold during that time. And so just from hearing all of that and experiencing that, that would be my explanation for the lack of bump there. But like you said, this is a 3-year low. And that's got to have something to do with everything going on, in the economy and just in the world right now.
Well, and I think it probably speaks to people's desire for security more than
Yeah,
anything, because and I don't have it pulled up here,
the
unfortunately.
pyramid. Yeah.
The what?
I was just going to ask you if you have it, but I don't know how easy it is to find.
Oh, I don't. Not we won't pull it up on Facebook Live, but I was just gonna say how ultimately what I think since interest rates have been so low over the last 5 to 10 years, people are locked into sometimes a great rate, sometimes a great mortgage payment, and so some of the potential move up buyers that are out there that may have been coming out here with this jump from April into May, thinking, well, let's go from that small house that we have up to a little bit larger, or that may have happened around this spring as well. Some of that just isn't happening because people feel secure in their payment. And just like you said, Jessica, with some of the economic uncertainty, if they have lost their job, or if they're concerned about just what's happening just in general, with 2020 being as crazy of a year as a lot of people say it is, that if that's the case, I could see why this number has gone low. But the reason we wanted to share is that ultimately, just like really selling anything, real estate is about supply and demand, and we still have demand for homes. I mean, and in fact, that'll be a great segue here, which we'll go into pending sales in just a second. And yet, supply is down. With it being a 3-year low, supply is down, and yet demand is up. I mean, this is the amount of single-family homes that have pended here in Davidson County over the last 3 years. And you can see this is a 3-year high, which is
Mhm.
almost a contradiction between the two. With inventory low and with sales being high, and that's what honestly I expected to see, a little bit of a bump here between April and May, and we didn't see the same here for listings though.
Yeah, well, and the listing statistic, anytime we see a chart and the line is going in a downward trend, it instinctually seems like a bad thing. And it's really more of just an interesting thing and a strategic thing. You know, fewer houses on the market, and kind of the point of this video, means that if you are in a position to sell your house, then you're in a great place because there are fewer houses on the market for buyers to choose from. And just like you're showing here, there are plenty of buyers out there.
Mhm. No, exactly, because and it is probably a product of what we've been going through over the last, gosh, almost 90 days when all this, the coronavirus really hit the US. That if you think about it, just for here we go, just go back to new listings. If you think about it, it's just a complete downward trend right here, and people may have been thinking, hey, I don't want people coming through my house. I just don't want to be seeing that right now. And yet at the same time, some people need to move. Some
Yeah.
people are thinking, hey, my lease is up and I've got to make something happen before July 1st when I've got to be out of my apartment, or they need to move. They're being relocated for work, because that stuff's still happening. I mean, even
Yeah.
despite unemployment being high, people have jobs. People are being relocated or transferred across the country. And so when that's happening, if somebody's being relocated here to the Nashville area, they're not selling a home. They're not putting something on the market, and yet they're needing to buy.
Yep. For
So just
sure.
something to think about right there. Um, Another thing we wanted to bring up, because really what we were seeing, we talked about this last month. If you remember, if you didn't check out our video last month, definitely go back and look. You can, if you don't want to scroll all the way down the Facebook feed here, go on our YouTube channel. You can find it on there. And we talked about how this may have been a sign that the market was really heading into a seller's market with a lack of inventory and still demand, because what we're looking at is months of supply of inventory, the amount of homes that are for sale. And when we're looking at a 3-year snippet, when we've been in such a strong seller's market for so long here in Middle Tennessee, this may not look like much, especially when it's barely changing from the bottom point here, 2.9 months to 3.4. That's half a month. That's not much of a difference. And yet, if we look back at basically the max when our system started tracking these numbers, and you look back to where it was really at the bottom of the market in 2011 with close to 10 months of supply of homes for sale, to where now we're at, three and a half. I mean, that shows how it's still a strong market. Like, this is kind of that balance point right here at about 6 months. And so it's been a strong seller's market for a while. And we were thinking this trend line was going to start to go this way this year and start to pivot back to a buyer's market. And maybe it won't because of everything. We'll see.
Right. It really has been interesting seeing how current events have impacted the market because, you know, like you're saying, there's the balanced market, which we really don't ever hover in that area. It's very much a curve, and we're kind of waiting to get back up, just like you said. And yeah, it'll be very interesting to keep an eye on these numbers and see how everything is affecting the real estate cycle, basically.
Mhm. Well, exactly, and the reason, like, why we're saying we were thinking it was going to cycle back up is, and to use a phrase that you just used, Jessica, that it's, waiting to see the curve, because ultimately real estate and all economics markets, they go through cycles. They have ups and they have downs. And in real estate, when we think of a historically strong market, that was, I mean, here in Nashville 3 to 4 years ago was kind of the peak of the strength, and it's still been a strong market. Don't get me wrong. Like, last year and the year before was still a strong market. 2017, that was everything was going in a heartbeat, and it may even get back there. Who knows? We'll see. But then, this was more what we consider more of a weak market. In fact, we're working with a client right now who we're selling her home, and she bought it somewhere around here. I can't remember exactly when. And she was saying how that home that they bought, and I looked it up, I think it had been on the market for something like 200 days. And it was it's that was typical back here, and it's the exact opposite right now. And just to show one other stat before we not wrap it up, but we do have one other thing we're getting into also with after this. This is right here what we call days on the market. And so this is the biggest thing that probably made me scratch my head this morning as we started to pull these up, is that, as you can see, like, days on the market, and what that means, just basically the average time it's taking a home to actually, excuse me, this is actually the median time we're looking at. The median time it's taking homes to go under contract here in Middle Tennessee. And so it's going to be basically the middle between everything from that home that hits the market and has multiple offers that first weekend to that new construction home that's been listed for a while and it took them a few months to pen. It's going to be, the median between all of those numbers.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing to me is the fact that we're not seeing that decline. We were seeing it rise last year, as we've talked about here recently, and that was a sign again that the market was changing heading into 2020. And yet, even though, as we just talked about here, months of supply is technically down, it's pretty even where it's been. However, it is down a little bit, and homes for sale is down, and new listings, it's being blocked on my thing here. Let me just move that out of the way. New listings here is also down. When we look at though days on the market, that's still going up. And what do you think about that?
Well, I think that the difference, I mean, like you said, we would normally expect this number to go down because there are fewer listings out there and still the same number of buyers. Normally, though, markets are driven by buyer interest, and that's why you see that days on market change or go the opposite direction. In this case, the market's changing because there aren't enough listings. There's not enough inventory. And so that's where we're seeing the difference between what we'd normally see and what we have here.
And that very well could be. And just think about though the fact. I hope my internet keeps going here now because this is gonna. We'll see if it doesn't end up wanting to load here for us. But there it goes. Think about the fact that pending sales, it's still high. I mean, in fact, if we look, that may be the highest, the most we've ever seen in 1 month. It kind of looks like it if we're looking. That's for single family homes in Davidson County.
Yeah.
And so I mean that tells me demand is kind of at an all-time high. At least it was in May. And so just something to think about right there when we're looking at days on market and supply. And long story short, we're wanting to impress upon you that ultimately it is just such a strong time for sellers. All these factors are pointing in the right direction, probably aside from the days on market. They're pointing in the right direction. Things from pending sales still being strong, the amount of your competition being low. That's what you want to see as a seller. But something that you don't want to see, probably the last thing that we touch on here as a visual, is the unemployment rate. I mean, we've talked about this on a couple other videos, and so I don't want to drill too deep into it. But this is just the unemployment rate going back 20 years, just a visual representation of it. And obviously, I mean, this is. See if I can get my mouse over April. I can't for some reason, but it was about
Like
14.5%. Yeah, about between 14 and 15%. Was the unemployment rate in April, which was, I mean, I don't know if it's an all-time high. It was a 20-year high, though. I mean, it dwarfed the unemployment rates of the Great Recession that we saw 12 years ago, 11 and 12 years ago. And it's interesting because this is a good sign when we're seeing, that it went from about 14.5% down to 14.7% down to 13.3%. And at the same time, though, like that's still insanely high. I mean, just for I know 13% is not a fraction or I guess a percentage that we hear too often, but that's roughly 1 out of 7. That's like about 1 out of 7 people that between 1 out of 7 and 1 out of 8 people that you're going to talk to and that unfortunately don't have their job right now.
Yeah. And it's horrible for everyone who's experiencing that right now. I know everybody listening, and I know the two of us, we know people who've all been affected by this. And unfortunately, it's going to continue to have effects. Even if everybody on this chart got a job again tomorrow, we're going to see some ripples from that. There's just no way around it. And so in terms of the real estate market, we know where we stand right now, and we don't know what type of effect something like this unemployment rate is going to have in the future. And that's why it's so important to just continually, monitor and pay attention to all these statistics and the things that we talk about in these videos, so that we can act in today's market rather than, guessing about the future.
Exactly. Well said. And I think it's important to bring up because even as the economy does start opening up again, and who knows what's going to happen with everything that's out there, and yet just because the economy is opening up again doesn't mean all the businesses that had closed down that caused the 14.7% unemployment rate in April doesn't mean that all those are going to come back. I mean, unfortunately, a restaurant right down the street from our office that I like to go to, they they closed down, and they started GoFundMe to try to reopen here, but who knows what'll happen with that. And yet, I'm just bringing that up because I think you're absolutely right, Jessica. It's going to have long term repercussions, and even something that you said, before, right before our we started recording here, we were talking about this and how, just because, like, say it gets back down to somewhere in here, which is really not bad. In fact, it's probably, I mean, it's 4 to 5% is probably what the economy maybe wanting to shoot for. This may even be too low. I don't know if that is such a thing for unemployment, but even if it gets back down to 4 or 5%, within the next couple of months, there may be people who wanted to buy a home that had to transition industries. People, sellers, you may not be thinking about this, and yet the buyer of your home, they need to get qualified for a mortgage.
Hmm.
And if you change industries as a home buyer, there's a little bit of a delay there, depending on what your industry that you're changing into. You may have to wait a year or 2 years to buy a home. That doesn't mean you're going to have to. Some can change jobs and still buy, almost immediately. And yet, if you're, going from a salaried job to starting a straight commission job, or it's called a 1099 as an independent contractor, all of a sudden, you're going to have to wait a couple of years to buy.
Hmm.
And it's that could deplete some of the buying market, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and you actually used a word that reminded me of something else. I mean, with all these people out there unemployed, even with the stimulus and possibly another in the future, people are using up any additional savings that they would have had. So even if they were in the market in February and they were ready right that minute to buy a house, and they had, their down payment saved up and everything else ready to go, that's probably, if they lost their job 2 days later, they're probably using that savings to make it through this hardship, and that's taken them out of the market for a while.
Hmm. Absolutely, and that's another great point, because you're right. It's, that's, I know we've probably, reiterated this stat quite a bit over the last, few weeks that we've been doing these videos, or last couple of months now. And yet there's a stat that's out there that over 70, excuse me, yeah, I think it's over 70% of people have less than $1,000 in the bank. And I don't know about you, but if I'm thinking, if 1 out of 7 people have lost their job, according to this, I mean, there's a good chance that some of that 70% that didn't have $1,000 in the bank are running into this, and they're going to start accruing more debt than they've ever had. Or they may go through, even if they had more than 1,000, like you said, they're going to start going through that and using that up. And it's just important to bring that up, because just to transition back to real estate, instead of just speculating about what could be in the economy, this is a great sign. The fact that there's buyers out there, and
Hmm.
as a seller, this is a great sign, because there's less competition for you. And this, to me, is uncertainty, because we
Right.
don't know if next month it's going to get back down to here, or if next month it's going to stay somewhere up here still. And I know, again, not to talk about the virus or anything, it's just the reality is there's a lot of people who think there could be a second wave of it even come the end of the year. And if that happens, and even if we get down to 7%, here in the next couple of months, and then another wave of this stuff happens, and the government decides, hey, we need to shut down again to keep people safe. Well, if that's the case, we could see a higher rate than this.
Right.
And if that happens, I think all bets are off for what ends up happening with the real estate market. And so, if you've got, this doesn't mean, hey, sell your home immediately just because you want to. But what we're trying to get across to you is that if you have desire to make a move, like you want to get that house with all that land that you've been dreaming about for the last couple of years, this could be the end of the window to make that happen, or at least to do it with some real financial strength.
Yep. I mean, I think you took my last point right out of my mouth. Is we know that we're in a good position now. And so if it's something that you're planning on in the next 1, 3, 5 years, now is one of the better times to do it, because we don't know what's going to be coming around the bend, and statistics like that unemployment rate probably indicate, things aren't going to remain exactly as they are.
Well, and it's interesting, Jessica, that, if we talk about a lot of times in real estate, and I think the months of supply is a great visual for it, how, these economic markets, or the real estate market, tends to stay that way for a few years and then transition for a few years. So you think about here it being a buyer's market, I mean, this was 2000, basically 2008 when the system started calculating everything. It says 2009 here. It's a buyer's market all the way back then, and then it didn't transition into a seller's market until 2013. It took a good
Mhm.
5 years to make that happen. It's been 7 years since that transition. If that happens in the next year or two, it could be another 5 to 7 years until we see another market like this. And that's what's so important to bring up. And I am curious how long it's taken the economy, in the past to transition back into a low unemployment rate. Like if we're thinking about 5% as the threshold of unemployment, in the last recession, it took,
Yeah, five,
what's
six
that?
years.
Yeah, I mean, it took 7 years really to, that's the end of 15, beginning of 16 to get down there. And here it is, you know, at its peak at the end of 2009. So yeah,
Yeah,
5, 6 years to make it happen. And who knows? I mean, again, this could next month. We don't know. We're not gonna be, claim to be just world economists, and we are real estate specialists. And so when we see this creates an alarm, and yet when we see this tells us that right now is an opportunity. So that's what we
exactly.
want to get across to you today.
Yep.
So I think I hit on everything we wanted to talk about today. Did we leave anything out that you wanted to cover, Jessica?
Yeah, no, I think those were all the points that we had.
All right, cool. Well, as always, y'all, if y'all have any questions, give us a shout. You can comment on this Facebook Live if you're seeing it on Facebook. If you're seeing us on YouTube, you can comment on there as well. Even if it's after the fact and it's not live, we're happy to answer any comments that you have or any questions. You can also email us, info at Foglia, Foglia properties.com. PM me. You can happy to answer any questions through a PM as well, or just give us a call, 615-591-5665. And we'd love it if you follow us here on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'd love to connect with you and just stay in touch and keep you informed.
Sounds good. See you guys.
All right, awesome. Thanks y'all for joining.